Okay. Welcome. Yet another episode of WhickTV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious, and we have a fairly serious political topic for you tonight, gang. I have gathered together a team to discuss something that Chris Christie, of all people, brought up in a recent Republican debate. Is Trump a threat to democracy? We've heard him talk about being a day one dictator. We've heard him talk about weaponizing the DOJ against his enemies. We've heard him speak a lot of really kind of crazy stuff. But is he actually a threat? Is there anything there when it comes to what he's saying? We're going to talk about it. First of all, I'd like to thank all my guests for coming and taking time out of their busy schedules. I really appreciate you. And we're going to start with Josiah, who I first brought this topic to and who was very eager to get into it. So Josiah, tell people who you are, your initial thoughts, and we'll just kind of go around. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. My name is Josiah. I used to be known in Destiny's community as Ruminate. I run a progressive politics channel on YouTube called Pondering Politics. No drama, no red pill, no social commentary, just politics. You can find me at youtube.com/@ponderingpolitics. As far as my thoughts on the topic, of course, Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. If there is such a thing as a threat to American democracy, this is it. The evidence is abundant. We have no reason to believe otherwise. Based on his past record, his aspirations, the people surrounding him, it's pretty clear. Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, which is why if you're an eligible voter, vote blue in November, no matter who.
All right, thank you for that. Next up, we have someone else who I enjoy speaking to, Average Debate Enjoyer. Go ahead, my friend. Tell us your thoughts on this subject.
So the question here is Trump a threat to democracy? And I feel like we can go back and forth cherry picking 1% of all of Trump's words in 3 or 4 days and trying to read the tea leaves of interpretation to form these narratives, but really that serves nobody. So I'm going to take a look at the central claim of Trump being bad for democracy and juxtapose that with the Trump administration and how the GOP legislated under his leadership of the party. I'm personally against hyperpolitics hyperbole. I don't think Biden's doing a bad job. I think 2023 has been his best year. I think if we get Biden, Trump, or even Kennedy as the presidential nominee and victor, not much is going to change and democracy is going to hold up after that. So in terms of fearing these people, I don't think there's any need for any of that for any of them, no matter where you stand on politics. I think our system's been proven durable throughout time, and I think Trump has brought a lot of things to the courts that he was turned down, and he just moved on or tried to create another iteration of it. I think we should incentivize legal theories be tested, and here we're going to talk about the alternative elector theory. Now, my argument moving forward is essentially going to be ignore the rhetoric, ignore the framing, and look at all of Trump's actions. Is he actually this authoritarian he's being identified as? Is he actually the Cheeto Hitler grasping for power or not? So thank you to everyone else that showed up. Thank you to everyone here debating. And for everyone listening, open your hearts and wallets to WIC for the holiday season.
You know what? You had me in the first half, I'm not going to lie, but the second half won you over, okay? Thank you for being here. Really appreciate to see how this goes. Next up, another person who I really enjoy, but I don't get to talk to as much as I would like. I'm really important. What are your thoughts here? Is Trump a threat to democracy?
Well, first, Wick, thank you for inviting me to the debate. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. I do think Trump is a threat to our democracy. For me, there's 3 things that you need for a healthy democracy. 1, you have to accept the results when you lose, and Trump has failed miserably at that. 2, you have to reject violence. Trump has failed miserably at that. And finally, you have to think that you have a chance to win next time. And surprisingly, Trump actually does seem to agree with that. So he's failed at 2 out of those 3 things. So I do think Trump is a threat to our democracy.
Okay, thank you for being here, and we'll get into it as we go. Last but certainly not least, a last-minute fill-in. We had another guest line up, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. But dooby, true American patriot that he was, stepped up to the plate. Go ahead, dooby. What are your thoughts?
My position is basically the exact opposite of Josiah's. I think that there is no evidence or any reason that to believe that Trump is a threat to democracy or opposes democracy, or that Trumpism, whatever Trump's ideology is, or the ideology of his supporters. I don't think there's anything that indicates that any of that is opposed to American democracy. So I'd really like to see where these claims are coming from.
Okay, and I guess with these two kind of polar opposite positions, we'll get into it. So I guess I'll start with the Trump is a threat side. So those of you who believe that Trump is actually a threat, make your case. You have the floor.
I mean, his rhetoric, which I do think matters, when the most powerful person on the planet says things, those words matter. They have the moral credibility, the political credibility associated with the president of the United States. You think about the authority that's vested in that office. There is no office in this country, probably not the planet, vested with as much power as the president. Commander-in-chief of the military, he can deploy the military in theory via the Insurrection Act, which he's threatened to do. He's ultimately the commander of all law enforcement organs in the United States as well. They all ultimately report to him. The executive branch is the biggest and most active of the three branches by far. And we've seen through the imperial presidency over the past 150 years, great deference politically is shown to the president. And he has a party, one of two major parties, that doesn't really offer much by way of meaningful pushback. And we've seen that even since he left office. He's no longer the president. He's just a cult leader at this point, and they still show constant deference to him. So yeah, I think his rhetoric, the things that he threatened to do in the previous election or the previous presidency, the things that he wanted to do towards the end, and was only checked because there were loyalists, people who said, no, Mr. President, you can't do this. If you try to do this, I'll resign. So I think, especially when you combine that with his aspirations for the next election, how he plans to staff the executive branch with loyalists who are, reporting only to him and are not loyal to the Constitution. Trump loyalists as part of Project 2025. If you give Trump 4 years, he's more deranged now than ever. He's learned some of the lessons which tripped him up last time, and he'll be surrounded by yes men. I think that's profoundly dangerous. That is the single greatest danger that goes all the way back to the founding of this country. Our founding fathers feared a bad faith president. They thought that that was the most dangerous threat to the United States. So it's been the oldest fear in our democratic republic.
Why is...
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I just want to add to that quickly that, look, it wasn't for lack of trying. I think if Trump would have succeeded at all the things he attempted to do, I believe people that don't think he's a threat to democracy would be singing a different tune, because, boy, he really went at it in 2020, even trying to declare, considering declaring martial law and the violence at the Capitol on January 6th to stop the certification of electoral college votes, having Mike Pence throw out electoral college votes. I mean, the whole scheme that's unfolding and hopefully soon in federal court over the 2020 charges. So I think, again, if Trump succeeded with even a couple of the things he tried in 2020, then it'd be quite obvious that he stepped all over our democracy.
Is there a response to that from the other side? Again, we've had them simply saying, right, Trump has come out and said he's going to be a dictator on day one, and that he is going to weaponize the DOJ against his political enemies. He has said these things. Why should we ignore that? Like Tyler, you mentioned we needed to ignore the rhetoric. If someone tells you what they're going to do, why would you close your ears?
Well, because a lot of this rhetoric is cherry picked out, and it forms a mythos around Trump that doesn't accurately reflect even what he said then versus all of his other actions and the totality of his legislation. So the comment about the dictator on day one, where him and Sean Hannity were laughing on stage, Sean Hannity was trying to give him a softball question. Trump made a joke, obvious joke. They're laughing. And he says, in the context of the border and in the context of, what was the other, drilling. So the two things that the president actually has a lot of power over is issuing these permits, purview of the executive branch, and border policy, purview of the executive branch. So the two things he said, I'm going to be a dictator on, even sarcastically, were just those as well. As far as the DOJ comments, he was asked that the DOJ is potentially being weaponized against you. Would you do that back? And he said it could happen. He didn't say he would do it. It's a lot of what you've seen under Trump, where he says something vague, one side that likes him reads the tea leaves one way, one side that dislikes him reads the tea leaves another way, and we just attribute these two mythoses of the guy to a person that you really don't have to do that for. He's just
Tyler, he's repeatedly said, he hasn't said just once or twice about the Department of Justice. He said it repeatedly. He said it in pre-recorded videos on Truth Social. I'm calling on all Republican attorneys general and district attorneys to indict the communists and Marxists everywhere across the country. When he says it multiple times, is it just a joke then? And again, where I'm to Wick's question, I'm trying to imagine a situation if somebody came up to you and repeatedly threatened you, you would just disregard the things, the threats themselves, the rhetoric doesn't count. Like I'm confused as to what you personally regard as a threat.
in this case, I would say it wouldn't be a direct threat. It'd be like Trump walking in the room, pounding his chest and saying, "I'm gonna beat someone's ass today," and not for aiming at anybody in particular.
He is
So-
aiming, but he is aiming it at people in particular, his political opponents.
I think it's rhetoric. I don't think it's
you-
good.
Well,
I
why
think
is
you need
it?
to put
Why
into
is
the
it not?
context of what he believes those political opponents are doing. So if he believes that his political opponents are weaponizing the DOJ, weaponizing other parts of the government against him, and he's asked, hey, if you were to get into office, would you do the same thing? And his answer is, it could happen. Well, in that context, he's saying, hey, this corrupt organization is doing something, is using the tools of the corrupt organization to target me. So why shouldn't I use those same tools against them?
Dooby,
Right?
that's with all due respect, that's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant.
Why?
Even if I were inclined to grant you that, I could, and I'd still win the argument, because the question isn't, does Trump have a good reason to be a threat to democracy? The question is, Trump a threat to democracy? So even if I grant you that, even if I say that Trump is the victim of a weaponized Justice Department, which is absolutely not true, by the way, we actually have plenty of evidence to the contrary, it doesn't justify him saying, yes, I will. It doesn't justify him or Kash Patel or Steve Bannon, people who are reportedly going to be in his cabinet, close Trump allies, saying, we will go after you criminally or civilly. It doesn't matter. We'll figure it out. None of that is justified. It's a losing argument.
Okay, hold on. So let's say I grant you that he does intend to do this, and that when he said that he meant that he is going to do this. If he were to weaponize the DOJ, how would this be an attack on democracy and not just an attack on his political opponents? Whether they're in whether they're in Congress or some other any of these other like independent agencies of the government that he's been targeting.
You don't think it's anti-democratic to weaponize a Justice Department against your enemies to like invent a predicate to go after them? Well, I guess.
Okay, so wait, hold on. So what you're asking is if I think it's undemocratic for the democratically elected president to use the powers of his office to target political opponents.
Yeah.
No, not necessarily. No.
Really?
I mean,
Is
there's
that,
an
is that
op-ed
something,
in
hold on. I want to dig
boy.
into that.
Yeah, please.
So can you elaborate on why it's weaponizing an institution of the government against your political opponents is not a threat? Can you elaborate a little bit on why that?
And especially since many of his political opponents, and well, also just to clarify, especially since many of his political opponents are also democratically elected, so you can't hide behind that.
Sure. Okay, so I think that I think you need to like flesh out what you mean by a threat to democracy. I agree that it's a threat to those opponents, for sure. It's a threat to to certain like independent government organizations that don't have oversight right now. It's a threat to career bureaucrats that Trump doesn't like. But you need to flesh out what you mean by a threat to democracy. Because when I think of democracy, I think of the ability for people to go out and elect representatives. And if people elect Trump with the understanding that this is what he intends to do because he's being very clear about it from your perspective, then I don't know why we wouldn't call that the democratic will of the people.
If you think that okay, actually this is great. We can clarify this right now. And Wick's the person who's hosting this. So Wick, when the topic was, is Trump a threat to democracy? So let's get very pedantic here. Did you mean the threat to people's ability to vote exclusively, or did you mean our system of government?
The system of democracy that we have in America
Okay.
specifically.
Dooby, so I don't know you that well, but I assume
that's not specific. Wick, you need to flesh that out more. So when you say the system of democracy that we have in America, what do you mean? Right. So far you're saying that he's going to come in and challenge our wait 1 second, and challenge bureaucratic institutions and try to shift the way that the executive branch deals with other branches of government. I'd agree with you. But again, given that he's being democratically elected into this position and he's being very open about his intentions when he gets there, I don't know why we'd call that undemocratic or a threat to American democracy.
Because if someone elects,
Well,
go ahead, IRA. I don't want. I'm the moderator, so I don't want to
It,
Go ahead.
if part of his platform that he's elected on is to undermine the system that got him elected to that position, would you not say that's a threat to democracy?
I think that people would say, and I think that he would say, and also supporters would say that those systems that he's targeting are actually the corrupt institutions that have stolen American democracy. So what he's doing is actually pro-democracy. It's an attempt to revitalize and to restore American democracy because it's been usurped by these corrupt organizations.
So let me ask you a quick question then. If Trump were to say, I'm going to cancel all elections, we're never going to have them again if I win, and his supporters vote him in, do you think that that undermines democracy, or you think that's just the people speaking?
We had a similar situation in this recently, didn't we, with, was it Erdogan? I believe it was Erdogan. And I think that, yeah, in that context, it would be the democratic will of the people to have a lifelong President Trump. So I think that if we are, I don't think that makes sense in like the context of American democracy, but if we're talking about like democracy as a as a concept, I think that you need to accept that sometimes the people are going to vote to take away their own rights or to propose things that are more authoritarian, or to support things that you consider to be more authoritarian. And so I don't know why we would say that this is like anti-democracy when the people, quote unquote, the people, are choosing, are of their own free will, are electing to do this, to give him this power.
Dooby, are you a pop culture guy? Just out of curiosity, do you like watch movies or anything?
I'm more of a book guy, but I do watch movies once in a while.
You ever seen Star Wars?
Yeah.
Do you ever watch Star Wars prequels?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Did you ever walk away? I'm just curious. When you left the cinema in like 2005, did you walk away thinking, "Damn, that Palpatine guy, really pro-democratic"? Like the whole theme of the Star Wars prequels was how a democratically elected leader brought more democracy to the galaxy. Because the idea that a leader who ascends to power, a totalitarian leader, an authoritarian leader ascends to power via democratic means, therefore anything he does is democratic inherently. That just seems like.
No,
I suppose, yeah, it just seems like really.
No, I'm saying that what I'm saying is, well, so to answer your first question, sort of, I think that the issue with the Empire in Star Wars wasn't that it was he was like an authoritarian or that he's like a fascist Sith ruler. The issue is that it was a human supremacist organization that oppressed the other groups in the galaxy, right? So like that's the actual issue with the Empire. And if you, I don't want to get too nerdy on you.
No,
if you look at the lore,
the Star Wars references
wait, one second. Just to support my fascism, right? If you look at the lore of Star Wars, right, the galaxy was actually much more stable under the Empire. Trade was better, living conditions were better.
Lots of genocide and slavery.
Well,
and then the Civil War happened. And then the Civil War happened under the Empire. Right. And then
this isn't Star Wars.
Just, yeah.
Okay, I'm
that's a human supremacist issue. Right?
I was curious. I was curious. He answered. I appreciate it. I'm gonna have to rewatch the films and get a new appreciation for it.
So wait, because I didn't answer his other question. I don't think that's fair. Just really quickly. So I'm not saying that if he were elected to be the fascist leader of the new American Reich, right? I don't think the American Reich itself would be a democratic institution, but I think the process through which he got there would be a democratic process.
So
then you would say that's a threat to our democracy, what we have here. I think you would agree, right?
Yeah, but I don't think that there's anything to indicate that one, Trump has any intention to do that, and two, that his supporters would allow that. From my understanding of like Trump's supporters and their issues, many of them do believe that the election was stolen. So they already believe that democracy has been usurped, right? And this is why they support Trump. So I think from their perspective, they're supporting the pro-democracy guy.
Yeah, but their perspective is immaterial when it's not supported by the facts and evidence. Like, so two things for me based on your argument. Number one, when we say Trump's a threat to democracy, we're not saying that he will become president again via undemocratic means, right? That's part one, step one. He can be democratically elected to the most powerful office in the land and then abuse that power in a way which would undermine our system of government, the constitutional democratic republic in which we live, notions of like checks and balances, separation of powers, federalism, et cetera, and so forth. That's one thing. And then the other thing is the idea that simply because there are people who claim, or perhaps claim and sincerely believe, that democracy has been taken from them is irrelevant. It's like people who say that there are people right now, 10% of the population say that the earth is flat. They're fucking wrong. Right. It doesn't mean that their position is equally valid. It's just that they sincerely believe the things that they do. They're still deluded. They're still anti-science. They're still anti-factual. So
yeah, I agree with that. But this is why I said earlier that I don't think there's these changes that he's proposing to make, right? So if he were to implement these changes, I don't think there are any that I've been able to find that are like a threat to democracy or some kind of attempt to pull power away from the voter in a way that's
Do you think the
like
free press? Well, let me ask you specifically. Do you think a
Sure.
free press is inherent or is valuable to our democratic republic? A free press.
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
of course.
So what about when Trump says that he wants to prosecute MSNBC because they're critical of him?
I don't think he would say it's because they're critical of them. I think he would say it's because they're lying about him.
It doesn't matter.
He would say that,
But it doesn't.
well,
But
it does matter when you say he wants to do it because they're critical. This implies that he wants to punish people for being critical toward him. What he's actually saying is that he believes they're lying and they're slandering him and they're spreading false information,
so
which is something that there are already rules against. But then
but wait a minute, hang on. So two things. Number one, he actually has to make his case in court. He's free to sue MSNBC for libel or slander. He'll lose every time. He'll lose. So he has democratic means to address that. It's just he knows he's fucked if he tries to avail themselves of that right. So that's one problem. The second problem is even if he feels that they're lying about him, that doesn't justify prosecuting. Lying about a political opponent is not a criminal violation. It still doesn't defend itself. I'm so confused by all this.
So my understanding of Trump's proposition to like the media in general, right, was that he wanted to open up libel laws, quote unquote, right, make it much easier to sue these people to attack these organizations. So it doesn't seem like he just wants a top-down approach where the government comes in and shuts down MSNBC or fines them. He wants to be able to take them to court for the things they're saying. And what he's saying is right now the libel laws on the books make it very difficult to do that. So he wants to make it easier to do that so that he can take them to court.
If you're a politician, they do. If you're not a politician or a minor, it makes it a lot easier. But yes, there's different sets of laws for politicians to sue for libel and whatnot.
I'm curious.
So
go ahead, Tyler.
Sorry. I just wanted to pivot a little bit. I wanted to pull out some examples of different administrations and our WAPO op-ed that came out this week. So the WAPO op-ed from a guy named Jason Willicks is talking about how it's very clear now that the investigation into January 6th, the 3 charges of corruption and 1 charge of obstruction that Jack Smith is doing, it's very clear that this investigation is fueled by politics. So right now, Trump is trying to plead for immunity. And he's saying that his actions were taken while he was president, so they're immune to prosecution. Jack Smith wants to appeal that. And instead of going through the normal appeal process, Jack Smith reached out to the Supreme Court to fast track the appeal process in order to get the trial date during the election process and not move to after. And that, according to this op-ed in the Washington Post, is very clear political partisanship and using it to interfere with the election. Now, I get you guys probably don't agree with it, but just in this hypothetical situation, let's say it's a possibility. Do you see that as affecting the outcome of the election?
I'm still trying to find the MSNBC quote because I want to quote it exactly. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No. So
is the question: do we see Jack Smith's leapfrogging to the requesting the Supreme Court take up this question as political interference? Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah. If the trial
on behalf of Joe Biden.
Yeah. Well, just in general, Jack Smith could be acting independently, but is he interfering with the election by trying to fast track this trial?
I wouldn't say he's interfering. You can make an argument he's trying to help Trump because if Trump's so confident he's immune, then perhaps this all gets dismissed and the problem goes away, no?
Could you, put yourself in the shoes of a Trump supporter, see him trying to fast track this election as some form of election interference? Is a better way to ask that, I guess.
I could, but I'd be missing a wealth of knowledge. My understanding is that this happens quite often, that people go straight to the Supreme Court. In fact, I'm sure Trump has asked to do that many, many times since it seems to be a favorable venue for him.
Yeah, it's a legal avenue available to him, even though it's relatively unconventional. But I want to take it back to the MSNBC thing. So 𝕬𝖏 was talking about, Trump in the previous administration talking about opening libel laws to make it, more easy to go after his critics in the media. But I'm talking about something he said back in September of this year, which is, and I'll put it in the. Hang on, I'll just go ahead and link it in our group chat. That way you all can scrutinize it.
Is it short enough to just read to the class, like the quote?
He says, they're almost all dishonest and corrupt, but Comcast, with its one-sided and vicious coverage by NBC News, and in particular MSNBC, often correctly referred to as MSNDC, Democrat National Committee, should be investigated for its country-threatening treason. Their endless coverage of the now fully debunked scam known as Russia, 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 and much else is one big campaign contribution to the radical left Democratic Party. I say upfront, openly, and proudly that when I win the presidency of the United States, they and others of the lamestream media will be thoroughly scrutinized for their knowingly dishonest and corrupt coverage of people, things, and events. Why should NBC or any other of the corrupt and dishonest media companies be entitled to use the very valuable airways of the USA free? They are a true threat to democracy and are, in fact, the enemy of the people. The fake news media should pay a big price for what they've done to our once great country. This is somebody... Sorry?
Just to put a highlight on that, there are two questions that come to my mind, and I'd like us to address them then. Is him threatening those who have reported against him, whether they be malicious or not, right? Is that a threat to democracy and the freedom of the press, etc.? And the follow-up question, or a question that goes alongside it, is his claim that them being allowed to report on him however they like, even if it's slanderous or malicious, is that a threat to democracy? And I'd like us to wrestle with both of these concepts.
It's not tough to wrestle with at all. Absolutely. Again, we're talking about the former president, the guy who wants to be the president, who would be the most powerful man in the world, a man who was the cult leader of one of two of America's political parties, openly threatening, and he doesn't say anything illegal. He just says they're corrupt, their campaign contributions to the DNC, they cover things that he doesn't want to talk about, like Russia, 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 that he says he's going to scrutinize their activities and threatens to pull them from the airwaves. That is, of course, a threat to free press, or a threat to free press, 100%. And what was the second question?
Is his claim that the media or certain media companies being able to
yeah, sure. Okay, that's right. Yes, 100%.
And
And if not, I want Tyler and Dooby to admit right here that President Biden today should go out on stage and say that he's sicking the Justice Department on Fox News, given their lies, their defamation with respect to the Dominion voting system in the 2020 election. So if you think it's okay,
yeah,
for
I'd be
Trump,
okay with that. Of course, I'd be okay with that.
No,
Right,
you
so
would
so
not.
if
Don't believe you.
why wouldn't I? Right. So hold on. So if there's a massive media platform that is intentionally, knowingly putting out lies, false information to the American public, that seems like a much bigger threat to democracy than the federal government scrutinizing that behavior. So do you disagree that if it's true that Fox News is intentionally misleading the American voters?
It's not true. I mean, it's not. It's not if.
Whoa, stop. Okay, and perpetuating this idea that the election was stolen and that Biden isn't the real president and Trump is actually the president. Why shouldn't that be scrutinized? Why shouldn't that be investigated to see why they're doing this and whether or not there should be consequences for them intentionally misleading the public?
The consequences of them intentionally misleading the public came from an $800 million defamation settlement that they had to pay. I don't think it's the purview of the Department of Justice to investigate media entities. As much as I loathe Fox News, I don't think that Biden should call for the investigation into Fox News unless he has credible evidence to believe that they broke the law. And even then, I would be uncomfortable for the president doing that. I think that's up to the attorney general. And that's with Fox News. Unlike MSNBC, we know Fox News fucking lied with the Dominion voting system. So if there was a situation where a news conglomerate was going to be under investigation by the Department of Justice, it's infinitely easier to make the case for Fox News than MSNBC.
Yeah. Okay. So,
but
Doobie, so
I also want Tyler. I want Tyler to jump in on here too, because I asked him.
Wait, just okay. Sure, in either of these cases, I don't understand why it seems like you'd be okay with either Fox News or MSNBC or any major media corporation misleading the public.
I'm not okay with it. Wait a minute. So why?
Hold on. So if you're okay, so if you agree with me that this is terrible, and this could actually be a threat to democracy, a threat to world peace, depending on what kind of shit they're pushing, right? Why shouldn't that behavior be both scrutinized and potentially punished? Why shouldn't intentionally misleading the American population, especially during election season or right after a very contested election, why shouldn't that behavior be scrutinized? I don't understand why the government shouldn't be involved in something that might destabilize a country.
Because the Department of Justice is there to enforce law. If they have credible evidence that Fox News or any other media company broke the law, then that's different. But that's not what Trump said. And that's why I would be uncomfortable even with Fox News. That's the difference. You're moving the goalpost. You're saying, wait, so if you don't want the sitting president or the potential future president to call for the investigations of media organizations that he doesn't like, then you must think that it's okay for them to lie to the American people. No, that's a complete red herring. It's a complete disconnect.
I don't know why you're just like throwing away his perspective
just
for
real
some
quick,
reason.
I
So
do
when we're
wanna
talking about
hear-
Trump and his actions, we need to like be aware of his
Dooby?
perspective, and his perspective is that they are lying or that they are pushing false information.
It doesn't matter
Or-
that
it absolutely matters.
Lying is not against the law, Dooby.
I want
That's
to get the other
difference.
participants in on this for a little bit, so I want to hear Tyler's answer to the question as well, right?
Could you
And I
ask the
wanna
question
hear-
one more time?
Sure.
Sure.
As 𝕻𝖎 put it, would you be comfortable if Biden called for the prosecution of Fox News for their Dominion voting scandal that they had?
I mean, like Biden called for the persecution of 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙. I don't think it's relevant. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's, especially for tainting the jury. I don't think it's a good and smart thing to do. I'd be fully comfortable with it. I don't like it. I don't think it's good. But I don't think that's, I think we're kind of, again, taking some words Trump said, attributing to a mythos behind that, and building up this caricature of him that doesn't actually reflect Trump's actions, which were pretty docile when he was in office in terms of the media. I want to ask mostly here, like when Obama used the government to wiretap a Fox News journalist to illegally get it, well, not illegally, but to get his source without the permission of the news journalist, was that infringing on democracy in some way? And I feel like
Obama absolutely overstepped in terms of executive authority. That's something that we've long known about. But here's the thing: it doesn't matter, because even if I grant that for Obama, it doesn't change the question about Trump. So I don't know what Biden said about 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙, but again, that's a person caught on camera kneeling on a black man's neck/shoulder and the guy dying. That's a separate issue versus calling for the investigation as the head of state, head of government, and ultimate head of the Department of Justice, investigating a media conglomerate who just so happens to criticize you quite a bit. These are apples and oranges. So my question is, would you be comfortable? Would you be okay with? Would you find it sketchy? Would you find it dangerous? Do you think it's problematic for a president to call for the investigation of a news organization without evidence that they committed a crime?
I don't like it on any level. I tried to go through several different levels. I don't think Trump was directly calling. Like, I think what you're alleging would be more reflective of Trump actually calling these people on the phone and saying, go after these people. If
he's not in a position to do so, he called it. But
I'm just saying, if he generally says it during a campaign speech, I guarantee you it's more to fire up the base than to legitimately call. It's like when he called for Russia to hack the DNC. He wasn't legitimately asking Russia to hack the DNC. He had a smile on his face. They were having fun at a rally. I think we're taking some of his rhetoric and attributing more oomph behind it than what's actually there, where he's really just trying to fire up.
Why wouldn't Trump be smiling when he's calling on Russia to hack into the DNC? If I were Trump, I'd be smiling too, because all that would do is benefit me. I'm so it's like he can't really enjoy that gift. He was smiling as he opened it. What are you talking about?
I want to make sure IRI can get in here too. Go ahead, IRI.
I feel like, Tyler, you're giving Trump a lot of leeway here. Like, what if Trump went on TV and was like, kill all Mexicans? Would you be like, well, it doesn't actually mean kill all Mexicans. He's just kind of joking about
IRI? Was he smiling when he did it?
Yeah,
No,
I mean,
where
do we draw the line?
And all Mexicans are still alive.
All
Mexicans are still alive.
If he said kill all Mexicans, that's a legitimate call to violence. That's an infringement of First Amendment protections, and it's an infringement. Like, it's not First Amendment protected speech. So no, in that circumstance, if he was legitimately calling for that, absolutely not. I don't even like that he said a Mexican judge can't be his can't oversee his trial legitimately because of his race. That's like the classic textbook definition of racism from Trump. So no, I don't
Tyler,
like that.
With respect, I'm confused. So rhetoric can only be a threat to democracy if it violates First Amendment protections. So, like, let's say I right now say publicly, I wish we had a fascist form of government. Please don't clip that. That is me, if I meant it. Exactly. That is me calling for a literal end to the Democratic Republic, but it wouldn't be violating my First Amendment liberties. Yeah, I think so. What I'm saying is, if I'm calling for the end of the Democratic Republic, that's clearly me threatening democracy. I want it gone. I want it that they're mutually exclusive, but I wouldn't be violating the First Amendment. So I'm really confused.
Take a look at it this way. When Nikki Haley went on that news show and said that, like, it's her personal preference to make it so you have to identify yourself when you're on a platform online, She's not actually going to implement any policy or legislation that would do that. She's not anti-First Amendment. She's not anti-privacy or anonymity. She just voiced a personal preference. So if you're saying I would like a fascist government in the United States, like, I disagree with you, but unless you're taking actions and the totality of your actions show a preponderance of you moving in that direction, I think it would be illegitimate to take that one statement and attribute it to your entire outlook on life.
Trump didn't state a preference, though. He said, when, I'll quote, "When I win the presidency of the United States, they and others of the lamestream media will be thoroughly scrutinized for their knowingly dishonest and corrupt coverage of people, things, and events."
That's rather vague. That could mean a lot of things. So again, I was trying to say this earlier. A public figure and a politician have a completely different standard when it comes to libel and slander. And maybe he could be talking about changing those laws so that a public person has the same definition as a private person, making it easier for Trump to actually go after them legally.
I'll actually take your side a little bit here, Tyler, in that I think his rhetoric is kind of hard to nail him down on. Like, I agree with you. Like, it is a little vague. You could play games with it. And I understand where Josiah is coming from on that. I mean, at some point it goes too far. But I think his actions kind of speak loudly. So it's that, like, old saying, I can't hear what you're saying because your actions are screaming so loud. And so I look at his actions like in 2020 and his intent to undermine democracy. The false slate of electors, his encouraging of state legislators to play along, and the pressure he put on people. I mean, are you not concerned about this stuff, or are you just like, well, it's all legitimate, and he was just voicing his opinion that he thought he won?
Well, if you look at the preponderance, I'd be concerned if those things that you brought up, which you summed up pretty accurately. I think it's okay for people to use untested, maybe potentially shady legal theories, as long as they accept the results, which he did. He said on January 7th, the peaceful transfer of power, and then on January 20th, he stepped down exactly when, how he was supposed to.
What happened on January 6th?
That doesn't count, Wick. That doesn't count.
No,
come on. It's only time began on January 7th until January 21st.
Is because the interpretation of that is up for debate. I didn't want to opine like my version of it's correct, so I skipped it. But that being said, January 7th on, he did everything right. So that to me would show. And then prior to that, if you look at his entire administration and how the GOP legislated specifically under him versus Bush, Clinton, Obama, the executive branch lost more power in 4 years under Trump than it probably lost my entire lifetime before that. I have all of the policies. It's like 35 policies written down here. I can go through each one where Trump either ceded his own power as the president to his branches, and then the Congress used the, what is it called? The NCA. It gives Congress oversight over every new rule made by an executive agency. So he ceded a ton of his powers as the president to his agencies and then put his agencies under congressional review. That took a lot of this regulation power from the executive branch and pushed it back to Congress. And it does it for future presidents as well. As soon as the Republicans took the House again in 2023, they started using the NCA over and over again as well. It had only been used one time since 1994. And then under Trump's first year, it was used 17 times to repeal new rules and regulations under the executive branch. the Constitutional Review Act, Congressional Review Act of 1994. So I would argue if you really look at Trump's presidency as a whole, he stripped way more powers away from the executive than any president of our lifetime and made it so it'd be harder for an executive to be an authoritarian.
Yeah, I don't accept that characterization. I'll look at the particular law for example, but then we've seen in other situations where, in fact, like he tried to violate, I'm blanking, it's a Nixon era piece of legislation regarding congressional appropriations in order to reallocate funds for his wall. Despite congressional authorization, he tried to take money from A to put it to B. He also eliminated DOD oversight compliance with respect to drone strikes. So we still don't know how many drone strikes that motherfucker conducted in 4 years. So no, I reject that this idea that all he did was cede power. And also it would be irrelevant given that he's the cult leader of the Republican Party and they stand a pretty damn good chance of certainly taking back the Senate. They already control the Supreme Court, and it's a 50-50. I shouldn't say 50-50. Right now we're favored in the House, but they're still relatively competitive in the House. And given that he has pretty totalitarian control over the GOP, they've consistently demonstrated fealty to him in the 3 years that he's been out of office. He has no political power whatsoever beyond what's in their head. I'm not confident in their ability to meaningfully check him. Democrats will, but Democrats are one half of the political parties in question. So getting back to what IRI was saying, to me, it's, we're focusing, or I was focusing, because I was willing to chase that down the rabbit hole, Trump's threats to the media. I'll simply say in conclusion, for my part, when a political leader as powerful and influential as Donald Trump is, and would be again as the president, threatens members of the media to investigate, to scrutinize, and he has no credible allegations of crimes, he has legal recourse if he thinks they commit crimes, that is dangerous. Rhetoric is dangerous. But to IRI's point, there's also his actions, his general rhetoric, his aspirations for the future, and everything regarding the 2020 election is a great example of it. Calling Georgia election officials and asking them to find one more vote than Biden had, threatening in the conversation or implying in the conversation that Brian Kemp or Brad Raffensperger would be themselves target of federal prosecution if they didn't do it. The fake elector scheme pressuring Mike Pence to just disregard electoral votes that Trump didn't like. Those are threats to democracy, because one of you said it in the beginning, our institutions are durable. I think it was you, Tyler. And I say this all the time. Our institutions are not divinely crafted. I don't know if you ever watched Supernatural or Harry Potter or Little Mermaid, when Ursula signs the contract and it's automatically binding. That's not the real world. People have to enforce and maintain the institutions. And so when you have bad faith actors in those institutions, like Trump wants to put in his second term, the institutions are vulnerable. Saying the guardrails held, ergo, somebody ran a car into the guardrails. They held. So let's toss the guy a fresh set of keys so he can plow it again. Nobody would ever do that in any other context. And I don't know why you think we should here. Trump is clearly a threat.
So I kind of want to address a couple of things you said there. And in my notes, I'll show you guys after this conversation's kind of going how I thought, a little bit out of order. I want to talk about that Georgia call because I prepped for that. I listened to the entire call and I read the transcript. That is very misrepresented. I read Trump's call. He is not asking Roethlisberger to go find votes that don't exist. What he's talking about is go look through Fulton County, go look through the 300,000 mail-in votes. I guarantee you're going to find discrepancies or things that invalidate those votes. If you do a signature check, you're going to find forged signatures, blah, blah, blah. He goes through several different ways that potential mishaps, not even fraud, not even bad actions by the Democrats, just inadequately cast ballots could be found in the Democrats' votes in just Fulton County and the 300,000 mail-ins that would put Trump over the limit. He was telling Roethlisberger to go through all those votes with a fine-tooth comb and see if you could find those discrepancies. He wasn't asking him to make votes up out of thin air.
At any point in that transcript, did he say, and by the way, if they don't exist, don't worry about it?
Not to the best of my knowledge. I didn't search
Of course,
that.
fucking not. Tyler, this is what I'm saying. Like, the willful ignorance here is astounding. If he really just wanted an accurate vote count, then he wouldn't say, geez, guys, all I need is one more than Biden got. And that is a quote from the transcript. One more. 17,801. He would just say, find all the votes.
He said 7,000 words, though, and you're quoting 6. And that's kind of my point. You're taking a couple things out of it and building a mythos that this guy is an evil mastermind, when if you actually read the whole transcript, what he's asking for isn't very unreasonable. And it's the same thing, like when Mayor Eric Adams, there were some issues with the primary in New York where they double counted votes from a different primary or something like that, and he got second place in the primary polling. He challenged it, and he was 100% correct and vindicated from it. But when he challenged it, people were calling him Trump, saying that he lost and get over it. You have the right to challenge the election.
Trump did, and he lost. Yeah. He lost.
Well, there was definitely a few things that didn't get fully. He had to drop several cases because he ran out of time. So it's not like every single claim he made.
He has had 3 years and a giant public platform to vindicate his position, and he has failed every time. Every goddamn time. He's like, I'm going to hold a press conference tomorrow. I have so much evidence. The press conferences always get canceled. The ball always gets kicked down the road. And I say this with affection because I enjoy sparring with you. The charity you give him is completely indefensible. Maybe we should probably err on, well, he loses every court case, or every court case gets kicked out. Every time he says he's going to present the evidence, he never does. Maybe I'm more right, and maybe we should just assume that he doesn't have the evidence and say, well, maybe he does. It's 50-50.
I'm not going to defend his claims that the election was illegitimate and things like that because I don't believe them. There's no proof. No. I'm not going to defend them after the election. I'm trying to talk about prior to the election and when he still had court cases pending, when Biden had yet to be put into office. He still had time then to legitimately challenge the election, and that's the time period I'm referring to.
He had time to litigate. Yes, he had time to litigate, and he did that. But the last thing I'll say, and I'm sorry, and then I'll shut up, and you can go back to IRI. But this thing that he said 7,000 things, and you're taking a sentence out of it. So if I write a letter, don't clip me out. So if I write a letter saying I'm going to kill Wick, and there's 7,000 or there's 6,780 other words in that letter talking about why I hate Wick and why I think Wick deserves, to be Minecrafted. It doesn't change the sentence that I'm pointing out.
It absolutely does.
No, it would not. You would have a point if the other 7,000 words contradict the sentences that we're talking about. Find me the votes, but they don't. Those votes didn't exist. If Trump really was interested. They did.
So the other words are, it's, if you actually read the transcript, it's all him saying that he knows these votes are out there, that they have accurate counts, and that these mysterious ballots showed up somehow. So he believes the Democrat Party is trying to steal the election. So what he's saying isn't, go find votes that don't exist. It's, hey, we have these votes. Where the fuck are they? They're here somewhere, so find them. So when you say all he's saying is find the votes, find one more vote than he has, you're leaving out all the context of a situation where he and his team seemed to legitimately believe at the time that the election was being stolen. And they were wondering where these votes were.
No. So again, if I say, anybody can say anything, Dooby. I can say the earth is flat, but the earth is still round. Trump can say, guys, these votes exist. They're out there. Go find them. They didn't exist, which is what he was told at the time. Mr. President, we really wanted you to win, but we have double-checked this. These votes don't exist. Every goddamn audit that was done in Georgia and every other place after the fact reaffirmed Biden's win. Those votes didn't exist. We can speculate as to whether or not Trump sincerely believed they exist or if he was lying, but it doesn't matter. The votes weren't there, and he asked for one more than Biden got, which means he's clearly not interested in an accurate vote count. But again, that's also one piece of evidence.
Okay, but again, when you say, he asked for just one more than Biden got, he's saying this in the context of a situation where, again, he believes he should have far more than Biden has. So he doesn't understand how they can't even find one more than Biden has. So I think that
I agree.
It'd be as if you say that you have this recording of you saying you're going to kill Wick, right? But every other sentence in
can I even use that verb, by the way? I don't know what the TOS rules are. Can I say that in a sentence?
All I know is now we can all jiggle our boobies on stream. That's a thing, but I don't know anything about the killing stuff.
But it'd be as if you had an hour-long recording of this, and every other minute of that was you explaining how it's not actually your intention to kill Wick, right? You're gonna play kill him. You're gonna when you say kill, you actually mean he's pissed you off and you're gonna smack him upside the head, like when a brother says I'm gonna kill you, sister, when he's like she's like eating his fucking ice cream or something. Right, so if every other sentence contradicts the idea that you're going to kill this man, when every other sentence here contradicts the idea that Trump just wanted them to like invent votes that he didn't actually believe existed, it doesn't make sense to say
that wasn't my claim. That wasn't my claim. My claim was that Trump wanted them to find votes that didn't exist. Those votes did not exist.
Okay, but he believed they exist. So this is why I said earlier, from his perspective and the perspective of his voters, because I do believe that Trump is egotistical enough to believe that he did win and that it was stolen, right? He just can't believe that he lost to Biden. So they must have done something to steal it from him, right? So and I agree with you that that's not true, right? I absolutely despise Trump for lots of reasons. But I don't think it makes sense to when we're discussing about whether or not he's a threat to democracy, to look at a situation where he seems to legitimately believe that he's defending democracy and is in his support of he's defending democracy, and that none of his policies are opposed to democracy.
The idea that he believes.
Yes, go ahead, interject, but then I have a question, so go ahead.
Sure. I just want to say, Dooby, I understand where you're coming from, but this is after Trump had his U.S. attorney tell him that there was no fraud. This is after the U.S. attorney for the area reported there was no fraud. This is days before the certification of Electoral College votes. So if he was curious what happened, and I think there were more votes, don't you think that would have been more appropriate for him to call maybe afterwards, have a meeting, sit down? And I just think it's inappropriate for him to call the Georgia Secretary of State the head official of elections days before the certification of the Electoral College votes and even ask these questions. I mean, can we agree on, do you
I agree with
disagree
that.
on that?
Yeah, I agree with
Okay.
that. I disagree with the entire process Trump went through. Okay, to be clear.
Okay.
But
I do
think
want
that,
to, I just
sure,
want to
go ahead.
emphasize again, Dooby, I just want to emphasize that he was told by people. It's not that he just thought, like, this is going to come out in court as well. And we saw this during the January 6th Select Committee in interviews with these people, the U.S. Attorney, 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙, the U.S. Attorney for the area, 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙, Bill Barr. They told him, no, we looked into this. All your claims, you did not win. You don't have the vote. So, I mean, do you disregard all that and still claim he still thought he won?
No. Well, I think I agree with all that, right? I do think it was inappropriate. The moment that he went out on stage and said the election was stolen and he's gonna keep fighting, the minutes after that, I said lots of shit that the Secret Service, I think, will legitimately like arrest me for. Okay, like I'm very upset about him doing that. I was not okay with it, right? Even if he thought it was stolen, I'm not okay with him going out and saying that it's stolen on a fucking national stage. It's fucking ridiculous.
Do you think it was a threat to democracy?
No. I think it was a threat to the stability of the country for sure, but not democracy. I think it's a different kind of threat. But just really quickly, please. So I agree with you that it was inappropriate. He shouldn't have done it. But I think if you put this into the context of Trump's narrative of his view of the government and the officials that make up the government, and the swamp, quote unquote. So when he's getting these people telling him that, hey, actually, yeah, you did actually lose. Sorry, we looked into this. You lost. Sorry, Sleepy Joe beat you. He's going to think, because he's so fucking narcissistic, that there's some kind of trick being pulled on him. That either these people are lying or the people they're getting the numbers from are lying.
That's a great time to ask my question, because that plays into it almost perfectly. So we have outlined a man that has, despite all evidence, right, has been told by multiple sources, by multiple people, this did not happen. You did not win. And despite all of that evidence, right, I'll give him the sincereness here. I will give that he sincerely believes that everyone else is wrong and he is right and they were all just out to get him. But is that in itself not indicative that he is a threat to democracy when he is able to ignore all the facts of the matter, every advisor, every legal court case that he has had, and plow ahead anyway despite all evidence? Is there any evidence that we have in 2024 coming up, if he loses, that he won't just do the same thing again? That no matter the results of the election, no matter what the democratic will of the people is, he will believe, despite all evidence, that he was victorious? Is that in itself, having someone on the ticket so close to power, is that not in and in itself a threat to democracy?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No? Okay.
No, I don't think
Well,
so.
I think Josiah and I disagree. I mean, and Dooby, you said the swamp. Like, I get what you're saying, but these are his handpicked people, and these are Republicans that he's talking to on the other end of the phone. So, I mean, if that's the swamp, then there's no end to this, and you have to think, right? He's the swamp thing, and he's committing fraud at that point, which is a threat to our democracy. If our commander-in-chief is committing fraud and undermining our elections and putting pressure, I mean, the weight of the office of the President of the United States calling you, anybody, even if you're an elected official in another state, is tremendous. He's got the power of the DOJ behind him. It's quite intimidating, and I say it's a threat to our democracy to interfere in elections like that. You disagree?
You have to be specific. So I would say that if the claim is that his refusal to believe reality, right, to engage with reality on his loss, is a threat to democracy, I'm going to say no. I think given the actions he took afterwards, right? So January 7th, where he sat down, he didn't try some kind of coup.
Except the one he tried the day before. Just
I disagree with calling that a coup. I totally disagree with that. Or even a coup attempt. I think that was a riot. I don't think it was a coup attempt. So I think that we need to, all we can do at this point is look at what he's proposing in terms of policy to deal with this, what he believes is a stolen election or a rigged election, right? So he believes his election was stolen. He wants to fix that issue. So what's he proposing to deal with that? And are those measures anti-democratic? I don't think so. It seems, I don't buy this idea that criticizing or scrutinizing media entities that might be linked to the American people is a challenge to American democracy. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's actually improving or making America's democracy healthier if there is an organization that is intentionally lying to the public.
Well, I just want to go back to my original point of my step number one of democracy working is accepting when you lose. And after your people tell you lost and you have no evidence to show you won and you lose in court, you have to accept your loss at some point. Don't you think that undermines our democracy for him to keep on fighting?
I don't.
Because how can you play a game if you don't agree when you lose, you lose?
We have so many. Sorry.
Well, no, I want to hear from Tyler for a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah,
we have a lot of instances where people denied the results of election. Bush v. Gore in 2000, there's a lot of people that at the time, even though it got challenged in court 3 times, Ohio said they wouldn't certify for it. It still was an election. People eventually got over.
Even Ohio did certify, though. That's the
yeah, they challenged it.
And Al Gore conceded and said, "I'm done. I'm not challenging any further."
Yeah. But up until that point, he challenged it. On top of that, like Trump went further than everybody else. That's kind of the point you guys are getting at. I'm going to concede that right now. Trump did go further than everybody else, but there have been a lot of instances. The entire Democratic Party sued Donald Trump for collusion with Russia. He was sued by the DNC, the party apparatus itself. The head of the Democratic Party sued his campaign for coordinating with Russia, which was unproven. So that is the DNC, the entire Democratic Party, signing on that Trump stole the 2016 election. And our democracy functioned just fine. Trump thinks it hindered his presidency a bit, but
okay. So there's so much here. So what you two are implicitly saying is that if somebody is a genuine believer or are deluded in anything, Hitler probably felt genuinely certain not to invoke Godwin about certain demographics. We can look to any tyrant, any fascist throughout history, or any serial killer or terrorist throughout history. They probably sincerely believed the crazy shit they said. By your logic, they can't be a threat because they actually believe the things they said. And to be a threat, apparently you have to be cynical. That's insane. No, it doesn't matter that Donald Trump felt the election was stolen. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It means nothing. Nothing.
No, I don't think it means nothing.
It does. It does.
It's good.
It does.
I mean, think of it this way: like, if somebody believes religion, they could be violent. They could be...
and I'll cop to it right now. You're right. So religious extremists. You know what they still are to their victims? A threat. It doesn't prove your point. My point and IRI's point is that Trump is a threat, and you're like, no, he can't be a threat because he genuinely believed the crazy shit that he said.
No, that's not true. So my point is, so what you guys were attacking initially was the intention, right? So this idea that he is intentionally or means to challenge American democracy, to fundamentally change American democracy to make himself some kind of like authoritarian or some shit like this. This is like what the general thing you hear from Democrats. So I think you need to look at his intention, and I don't think there's anything in his behavior that suggests his intention is to do that. So once we get past the intention, which is what I think to fix this issue that caused the election to be stolen from him, you need to look at what he's proposing to fix that issue, and none of the policies that he's put forward to fix that problem are a threat to democracy. Like, so we need to. I'm trying to figure out where the threat to democracy is.
My point. Hold on. My point with religion, really quickly, is religion can't be proven. Everyone that thinks religion is real cannot prove it. That doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to be violent. In fact, the vast majority of them are non-violent. So just because Trump believes something that he can't prove does not inherently mean he's a threat to democracy. It's the actions that he would take that could potentially be that threat to democracy. And looking at his actions legislatively, he went up against the court for executive actions, for different legislation that he several times. And when he got turned down, he didn't say ignore the courts, burn it all down. He went back to the policy, went back to the drawing board, rewrote it in a way that would be constitutional and pass it the right way. Same thing with the alternative elector theory.
Tyler, if a religious person threatened violence against you, are they not a threat to you? If they say, listen, I'm threatening you in the name of my God, I want to do something bad to you, because you're an infidel or you're a heretic or something, you're an affront to my God. Are they not a threat to you simply because they're doing it for cited and perhaps even sincere religious beliefs?
Yeah, if I said Biden's 2023 policy is quite possibly some of the best foreign policy of my lifetime, and somebody from Palestine threatened me as a result, absolutely, I'd 100% agree with you.
So that's what I'm saying. Trump's intention is relevant. I didn't claim that his intent. So I don't know if Trump's intent, because I'm not a mind reader, if his intent is truly 100% cynical and to evaluate him or to elevate himself. He seems like he's a malignant narcissist, but I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a mind reader. I'm saying it doesn't matter. A well-intentioned authoritarian versus a completely cynical authoritarian, they're still authoritarian in the end. And what you're saying is no, a cynical authoritarian, that's one thing. And a well-intentioned authoritarian, either it doesn't count or they can't be authoritarian by definition. His intent doesn't matter.
Hold on. I semi-agree with you, right? So like just as to where the threat to democracy is concerned. But using your religion example, I think what you're saying is akin to saying that somebody who's like a Christian or a Muslim, which are both belief systems, which, you know, certain interpretations are very anti-LGBT, right? Very anti-gay, very anti-women in lots of ways. It's like assuming that because somebody's a Muslim, they want to kill gay people, or assuming that because somebody's a Christian, they hate gay people. I think that doesn't make sense. What we need to do is look at the actions, look at what they're proposing, look at how they interact with gay people. So I think it's fine to have that initial impression, right? To say, oh, well, he's challenging the election, so he must not like a democracy because he lost the election. Well, then you need to look at his perspective, and his perspective is that he won the election, and he's trying to fix the institution that stole it from him.
I can't speak for. Well, hang on. I can't speak for IRI, but I don't think either of us opined as to whether or not Trump likes or dislikes democracy. My gut says he doesn't like it because no matter what he says, he seems to, oppose it further than anybody does when he loses. But I don't think we articulated what his intentions were, what his relationship to democracy was, other than that he was a threat to it. That's what I'm saying. Like,
okay, well then articulate the threat. I'm just,
well, IRI said earlier that he brought out the old chestnut of I can't hear what you're saying because your actions are screaming. So maybe IRI could just reiterate the actions that he believes that Trump has either taken already or has indicated that he plans to take that present a threat to democracy as we know it in America.
I just look at what was detailed in the indictments of what he was involved in as a co-conspirator, what he's charged with in trying to influence public officials to undermine the results, the false slate of electors. I don't know what his intention is. I personally think he just wants to be rich, and he wants to make a ton of money and he thinks if he's president, he can sell secrets or God knows what.
I think he also wants to stay out of jail. I think that's another.
Yeah, he wants to stay out of prison as well, of course. I don't know. I just, to me, it's the words are one thing, but the actions are scarier. And I think we'll see the details of that as the case unfolds. We've only had a preview of that per the indictments, which don't tell all the details. But one thing I want to mention is I looked at this DNC case, Tyler. I hadn't heard of this, and it looks like the DNC was suing Trump over the theft of their private property and that he abetted the Russians by encouraging them to hack. So I'm not really sure what your point there was, because it seems like it was just kind of a lawsuit, like they basically stole our email lists and stuff, and you encouraged them to do that, so you basically helped, and a judge tossed it. So I don't see how that's an acknowledgement of, claiming Trump stole the election or something like that, or not accepting the results. Did you interpret it differently? This is in 2019, so I hadn't seen it before.
It was it got thrown out in 2019. The lawsuit was that he coordinated with Russia, colluded with Russia, coordinated. The legal term that Mueller used was conspiracy. Him asking that vaguely at one of his rallies was him intentionally colluding with Russia to put out information that would hurt the Democrats in the election. And that was their lawsuit that got thrown out.
Well, that doesn't appear to be the lawsuit. The lawsuit is over stolen property, basically, that the emails were their private email list that they pay a lot of money for. Otherwise, what lawsuit would they have? They're not going to sue over losing an election. They have to sue over some financial loss.
But what ties Trump to that?
Well, that's why, I mean, the case was tossed. They said that he abetted.
Yeah,
Well, I'm saying it
but-
appears to be over private property, not over some idea like some hurt feelings or something.
Some stealing the
But-
election. It seems like a narrower case than what
Right.
you presented, is what
But
he's
hold on,
getting at.
but I feel like you guys are kind of minimizing the narrative around the Trump-Russia collusion thing. So for
Okay.
years, this was a massive talking point, both in the media and by the DNC, to suggest that Trump was like Putin's puppet and to call into question his legitimacy as president. So I think that's an interesting point because that Tyler made earlier, because I don't know why we would think that doing that for years, right, suggesting that the American president is a Russian puppet and is working for a foreign government, why that wouldn't be a threat to democracy.
Well, did he not? Did he not take the word of Putin over our own intelligence community and on the world stage? I mean, that
Did
was
he not
pretty
invite?
brazen.
Did he not invite Russia to hack the DNC? Did the Mueller report not yield convictions of wildly inappropriate and illegal ties between members of the Trump campaign to Russian state assets? Do we not know that Russia tried to influence the election in Trump's favor? When you take these data points in aggregate, I mean, you can still say it's a leap, but it's not entirely without basis, right? I mean, there's some facts which would suggest that Trump was a useful stooge to Putin.
I think it's inadvertent. I think that, like, if you look at the totality of what Russia did, they used Bernie Sanders first before Trump. They were going after Hillary Clinton, and Trump just so happened to be the person running against her. And when he wasn't, they propped up the people that were running against her in the primary as well. I don't think they intentionally did it to help Trump, but I think that was proven.
Well, they did intentionally, but they did, even if kind of like how I intentionally voted for Biden, even though my true object was simply to keep Trump out of the White House, right? They didn't accidentally help Trump. They did it deliberately.
Well, and more evidence, Trump claimed he had no deals in Russia, nothing in the works, and then Michael Cohen revealed that he actually, even up to July 2016, was still sending a letter of intent to develop a tower in Moscow. So, I mean, this is where we start to say something's fishy here. Do you disagree, Dooby, with all those examples?
I think it's fine.
Why we would come to that conclusion?
I think it's fine to investigate or to scrutinize this, but making the claim that the American president is a Russian puppet before those investigations are complete and before we dig into this, I think is too far. And that is exactly what the DNC was doing, calling into legitimacy the
through this
the
lawsuit
American
or
president.
just in general?
Both through. I don't know about through this lawsuit. I think it's fine for the lawsuit to exist. I think that the rhetoric, the narrative that was being spun around this by the DNC and by their allies in the media. When I say allies in the media, I'm not saying that all like MSNBC. I mean like pundits, like Rachel Maddow, like Keith Olbermann, whatever the fuck that guy's name was. Like these people pushing this narrative that Trump is like Putin's bitch, fucking nonstop. I think if we're to think that Trump's behavior or that his rhetoric is a threat to democracy, I don't know. I wouldn't think that is.
But see, that's to
Would
me.
you agree?
Go ahead. All right, I'm sorry.
Well, I just say real quickly, would you agree that calling Biden a criminal and corrupt without investigating is inappropriate as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. The investigation is warranted, but jumping to those conclusions, absolutely.
So this is where, to me, it's kind of a blurring of the lines. Even if I grant you that Rachel Maddow or whatever casting those aspersions was a threat to democracy, to me, I could bite the bullet and it still doesn't change the fact that Trump is a threat to democracy, and even more because he's much more powerful than Rachel Maddow. That's the point. Like the standard doesn't change anything. At best, you can just suck up a bunch of other people as well. And Tyler knows this. At the end of the day, because this is my thing, I don't care to cop to that shit because at the end, it's who's worse. And because I'm anti-Trump, I always win in that regard because he is the worst. He's much worse than Rachel Maddow. So to me, it's a red herring. It doesn't matter. The question is, when a powerful person, somebody who's powerful politically, somebody who's powerful with respect to state power, which is what he was when he was the president and potentially will be again, do their words, aspirations, and do the words and aspirations of people around them matter, and can that constitute a threat? I would say yes. I would say a powerful person making threats is dangerous, ergo they are a threat. When you have, again, like they released the wish list, Trump's wish list for his cabinet, and it includes people like Steve Bannon, who would be the chief of staff, arguably the de facto second most powerful person in the country, and he's openly saying, he said it, this is verbatim, this is not rhetoric, this is a promise. And Kash Patel, who's either favored to be the attorney general or potentially the director of the CIA, saying, we will come after you criminally or civilly, it doesn't matter. You have Trump right now trying to make the case that as president, anything he does entitles him to absolute presidential immunity. Legal scholars have pointed out that if Trump's argument is accepted and he's able to follow through on it, that means quite literally he could order his director of the FBI to round up his political adversaries, Minecraft them, and then when he leaves office, he can't be prosecuted, if he leaves office, because it's covered under presidential immunity. It's almost like, I understand.
I think that's wild fear mongering. I don't think there's any reason to go there.
Well, I mean, I don't know what your profession is. I'm not an attorney. I generally defer to legal scholars as well, who can interpret like the extent to which legal arguments can be made. But here's my point. It doesn't matter if Trump is in a position to follow through on everything. A threat. So I guess what I'm saying is Trump doesn't have to be on the precipice of tipping democracy over to be a threat to it.
If I may ask, right? And this is a question, right, that we have to ask ourselves. If he could do it, would he? And given the fact that he has said, I want to do this, this is what I want to do, right? Regardless of whether he can or cannot, I just don't see how that we shouldn't take that seriously at the very least.
I mean, what are we talking about? Because if as you just said, Josiah, he either criminally or civilly, this implies that he's going to use legal routes to go after these people, and they've potentially done something either criminal or to violate civil laws and norms for them to actually use the legal system. And he's not just going to get a pitchfork and a mob and go round them up to Minecraft them. So, like, if that's like, did they actually do something
better though, Tyler? Is it better? And I understand it probably is, right? But if Let's take the extreme. Let's take the extremes down and say, if someone says, hey, I don't care if you did anything wrong or not, we will find something after the fact. We are going to prosecute you, and we're going to find something to do that. Whether it's criminal, civil, we don't care. We will find something to go after you legally for. Right? Does that not indicate that they're willing to put aside whether or not you are actually guilty, whether or not you've actually done something, and they will say, we are just going to use this against you if you oppose us?
Yeah, what you're talking about is a fishing expedition, and we have regulations and laws on the books to prevent specifically fishing expeditions.
Who enforce those laws?
We have regulatory structures inside these structures. There's like DOJ regulations on the front end, and then we have the legal systems, norms, regulations, and precedent on the back end that prevent this authoritarianism.
This right here is the problem. Yes. Are they magic? Are they magically enforced? Who enforces them?
A lot of times it would be like independent. It really depends. Yeah.
It would be Jesus, Potter, Gandalf himself. It's people.
Yeah.
Who do these people report to?
It depends, because again, like some of these are political appointees that don't actually report to the president directly.
But Trump wants to change that. Even right there, even if I grant you that, Trump's ahead of you, Tyler. Trump's like, yeah, Tyler, exactly. Some of these people can't be appointed politically by the president. That's why Trump wants to change it. That's why he wants to implement Schedule F, which makes, like right now, when the president takes command, there are like about 4,000 appointees that the president can hire and fire at will. They're called political appointees. And generally speaking, the rest of the government enjoys some degree of employee protection. They're not at-will employees of the president. Donald Trump, the Republican Party, Ron DeSantis even, the Heritage Foundation is part of Project 2025. If you haven't looked into that, you should look it up. They want to make federal government employees at-will employees of the president, because their logic is executive power is vested with the president. He's the head of the executive branch. He should be able to hire and fire whoever the fuck he wants whenever he wants. These regulations that you're talking about are enforced by people who ultimately report to the president. This idea that regulation, we don't have to worry about a rogue president. Why would the founders have ever feared a rogue president? They wrote the Constitution. That's the ultimate regulation, baby. Why would they fear a rogue chief executive? It's right there in the Constitution, checks and balances. Because they understood as far back as 1789 that these things aren't magic. People have to enforce them. Trump wants to change the people to Trump loyalists. He currently commands the biggest cult in the history of this country. This is where you lose me. The regulations will hold because they did before. I just don't get it.
Can I ask a quick question to Tyler and Dooby? Who's a bigger threat to democracy, Trump or Biden?
I don't think either, personally. I really don't see either. I think they're both kind of milquetoast, center left and center right representatives of their party.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I don't see either of them as a big threat to democracy, and I really think the system is stronger than we're giving it credit for. I don't see either showing actions like that.
So you as a conservative don't see the DOJ pursuing Trump as a threat to your ability to elect the leader you want by imprisoning him?
I'm a Bill Clinton liberal. See, that's the thing. I don't like that mindset. I don't think that's what Trump thinks is going on to him right now. That's what Trump supporters say is going on to him right now.
Right.
So I think that
conservatives in general
generally happening, absolutely, that's a bad thing. That's like with third world countries. I don't like. And to kind of go into Wick's question a little bit to answer yours as well. The persecuting your political rivals if they actually did something illegal in the United States is kind of gone without saying. Like Nixon did something illegal, but instead of persecuting him, they let him step down and just go away and fizzle off into nothing. We don't do that here because of the bad appearance it had. Does that make it right?
He admitted guilt.
But is that a two-tier system of justice?
Well, so Trump has been the subject of. To answer your question, I agree with Tyler. Right? I don't think it's an issue for them to indict him or to go into these investigations. I think my issue is with the rhetoric of the party and the rhetoric of some people in the media, right, where they assume an indictment equals guilty and they speak about it in that way. So I really don't see that as an issue. And with Trump specifically, he's had I don't even know how many lawsuits and it's been never ending.
Hold on. You're roboting. Dooby, you're roboting. No one can understand what you just said.
I
heard him mine.
Yeah.
Oh, I heard him mine.
I think it's
Do check, Dooby. Fuck, because what you said.
Hold on. It is me.
Chat.
It is me. Give me 1 second. Hold on. Is everyone else hearing this, or is it just me? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Uh-oh. I'll be right back. I'll be right back, gang. I'll be right back. Okay, give me a second.
What's the story with?
Oh no, gang. I think Discord's just broken on us. Discord just broke. No. My stream's fine.
Election season, presidential election season. Lots of Pepe memes, lots of Trump supporters, lots of all kinds of people.
I think we're back. I think we're back. I'm sorry.
Wick, we can't hear you. I'm kidding.
Okay, I think we're back, gang. I think we're back.
Yeah. Okay. So just really quick. So the original joke was like a King Pepe thing, right? So because people might sort of like the Pepe emote, I'd be like a Pepe demon frog thing with a crown. Like that was the original joke.
I see. Noted. Thank you. Appreciate you filling me in on the lore.
No problem. So like just back to what I was saying before Wick rudely interrupted me to try to throw me off my stride. I think I think it worked. What was I saying?
We're talking about Trump being pursued by all these cases and lawsuits.
Yeah. So I think that that it's fine to do that. I have an issue with the rhetoric from the party and the media and some people in the media who treat indictments as like a guilty verdict, right? And they speak about it in that way and they spread news about it in that way. But I don't really have an issue with this happening to him, right? If there is a reason to believe he did something wrong, I think he should be indicted. I think he should be scrutinized, and I'd apply that to any official.
Yeah, I don't think anybody here agrees. I will speak for IRI. I am confident that IRI would say the same thing. That listen, if there's credible evidence you committed a crime, then it's okay for the relevant legal authorities to investigate.
Right.
But if PISCO were here, an attorney, they would say that that's one thing, but the sitting president, a politician, calling for publicly and not citing any evidence, just making vague general gestures towards corruption, and they just so happen to be either critics of his or opponents of his, that's a world apart. That is dangerous because, going back to what I was trying to say with Tyler, these norms and regulations are not self-executing. They're not self-enforcing. They require good faith actors. And these good faith actors would ultimately report to the president or be put in place by the president to begin with. That's the problem. So appealing to the regulations is irrelevant.
A question for you and IRI. And this is
Sure.
from my chat. $5 from 𝕍𝖎. Just see this. It's a good question, so I'm reading it. I'm not reading my super chats. Otherwise, I'll get to them at the end. But this one's worth asking. Do you think that Trump will be able to change all the laws and appoint the loyalists necessary to be an actual threat within 4 years without any challenges? Do you think he can do it? I guess you'd say.
He would need Congress. I think even if he won next year, which I don't see him doing, he wouldn't have enough people in the Senate or have the House or whatever. As far as appointing people, I think that is a valid threat. I mean, imagine if he put some hardcore loyalist as his attorney general and declared martial law or started opening investigations as retribution and trumping up charges. I mean, the sky's the limit if he got some real sycophants into positions of power. So I think he could, within 4 years, do some serious damage.
Yeah, so to IRI's point, I don't know what whoever the person said by change all the laws. I mean, obviously, if you do it the right way, you're supposed to do it via congressional action. Then the question becomes, well, then it does base quite a bit on what the composition of Congress would be. Because again, you think of the three branches. He's got the Supreme Court, at least in theory, with a 6-3 conservative supermajority. He would need both chambers of Congress, and Republicans are heavily advantaged, just generally speaking. They punch well above their weight class just due to our current structure. And then he'd have the presidency. To change laws or to do constitutional amendments, yeah, that would require all three branches and perhaps a supermajority of some sort. But that's not really the problem, even though that could be a problem because he'd be aided and abetted by Republicans. It's what he can do as the sitting president. So, so IRI mentioned the cabinet. I've heard people say, we don't have to worry about a cabinet because they have to be Senate confirmed, except the president can just make the person acting in the event that a Democratic Senate says, fuck, no, you're not putting Kash Patel as the CIA director or whatever. And Trump will go, that's cool. I'll just make him acting CIA director, and that's the end of it. So much of this actually requires presidential discretion, or is at the president's discretion. Executive orders, they have the full force of law, and the president can issue. He doesn't need to put it through a committee, whereas Congress has to get two chambers to work together with majorities or to get past the filibuster. The president can just sign a piece of paper. And then, and then in terms of the courts, when the Supreme Court goes to check a president, like that's a good example. The court, this goes again back to the founding. They have no means of enforcing their edicts, even if they disagree with the president. They require the president to go, okay, fair enough. And in the hands of a bad faith actor, as Trump seems to indicate that he would be in term 2, that calls that thing into question. I've used this example with WhickTV. President Lincoln told the court to fuck off a time or two, and the court's like, okay, fair enough. We can't do anything about that. That's why I'm saying so much of the conception of how we think about what a threat a president could be, we're so used to relatively good faith actors, even if they've been very different politically. Every president, think of the peaceful transfer of power. That was uninterrupted from Washington to Trump, because even people as wildly different as Obama and Bush or Reagan and Clinton or whoever, they still respected the norm at the end of the day. Trump was the only one to repeatedly, he didn't say he'd concede the election in 2016. He happened to win it, but he didn't commit to it then. He didn't commit to it in 2020. We have no reason to believe, going back to what IRI said, that he'd do it in 2024 if he lost.
This brings up a question from Lex Friedman, who donated $100 to Access. If you had the chance, and this is to everyone, right? If you had the chance to talk to Trump for 3 hours, what questions would you ask, or what would you like to tell him to convince him of your perspective, to convince him to do better, perhaps?
Lex, I would say, what about love? See what I did there, Lex?
Would we even be able to get a word in 3 hours with Trump? I feel like he would go on a infinite run-on sentence, and you would never be able to say anything. I don't know what I would say to Trump. He's obviously a fascinating guy. I went to his last rally as president in Dalton, Georgia, and was about 100 feet away from him. And he, is one of the probably the most famous person on the planet. And obviously, he's a fascinating guy. I had respect for him as a businessman, though I lost a lot of that. But I would just say, what kind of planet you want to leave for the American people here, man? Because I think, we're all Americans first, and I think he's acted quite selfishly. And I'd be curious about the classified documents and ask him, what was the story there, man? Were these just trinkets, just shinies? Like, what was the goal? I'd hope I could ask him, were you selling these, or why did you have this stuff? It just, to me, that's the biggest mystery of it all. Why did he have that stuff? So I don't know. Just on the spot, that's the first thing that came to mind for me.
Okay, Tyler and Dooby.
Oh, first off, hey Lex, I've watched you a few times. I would more try to appeal to. See, I think that Trump being a New York liberal conservative, he's more like Clinton than people want to give him credit for. So I would try to more appeal to like a lot of the legislative policy he tried to pass when he was in office. One of the things I brought up to Josiah in previous conversations, and I like to use it as an example, is after he dropped the chain migration reform, he had a policy to give 2.7 million dreamers a path to citizenship in the United States for border wall funding. And I really just like the spirit of that, where he took the concerns from both sides and tried to meld it into policy to get major things done to where both parties will walk away saying that they were the victor in some way. And I really would like to have him emphasize more on those sorts of policies and not being so toxic to the other side because he has to work with them. Now, never Trumpers are probably the most resistant group within a party to that party's leader. He has to win those people back over. He has to win over moderate center-left Democrats in order to get some of these things done. So he really has to tone down his rhetoric. I tell him to stay off of Twitter as well.
That's good advice for anybody.
Stay off of Twitter. Dooby, you got anything? And then we're going to continue.
I don't think I'd want to give him any advice because I really, really dislike the guy. So I'd probably just want to argue with him or insult him for a few hours. I don't think I'd give him any advice that might help him get elected or get any support.
Use reverse psychology on him. I'd be like, listen, if you really want to own the libs, run third party in every election.
That would be
Mr.
really
President.
funny, actually.
Dude, like, listen, let me tell you, that would really own the libs because they wouldn't be prepared for it, Mr. President. If you broke away from the Republican Party and said, you know what, don't go out and vote Republican, vote third party, you would be the man who changed history.
Okay. I guess we're kind of like at a bit of an impasse here. It seems to me that one side takes Trump seriously, what he says seriously, and the other just doesn't. And I'm really trying to.
I don't think that's true.
You don't.
No,
I take him seriously, but not literally.
You take him seriously, but not literally. Why not?
Well, because you have to look at the context in which he's saying these things. So even this thing about the Schedule F employees. So it's very difficult to figure out exactly who these employees would have been, right, if this had actually fully been implemented. But Biden, I think this was implemented or attempted, or went through, I think, in October of 2020. Yeah,
it was.
And then
drafted,
Biden immediately
and
shut it down.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to know who these employees actually are, right? But I don't think to beframing that, which is basically, if you look at the text of the executive order, it's about government employees that are not subject to the competitive market, I think is the wording, and they are like policy making, policy advocating, or this policy. There's another word, policy something. Basically, people who deal with either advocating for or writing policy, right? This group of people, this group of bureaucrats in Washington, which are like career appointments technically, are typically, because they're not replaced with the other 4,000 people whenever a new president comes in. For people on Trump's side, that is the deep state. I mean, this is the embedded technocratic class of bureaucrats that actually run the country, right? That are the rot at the core of the country. And I don't think that giving the president, Trump or any future president, the ability to appoint these people or to have them be replaced every election, I don't think that's anti-democratic, right? So if I'm just looking at the dude, and I agree that he's wrong about losing the election, but then I look at, okay, well, what has he implemented to fix this thing? And everything he's trying to implement to deal with this is actually something that might be considered either pro-democratic or something that I just agree with. I do think that media organizations should be scrutinized and potentially legally punished for intentionally putting out misinformation. Then I don't really see the dude as a threat. I just see him as a kind of an angry uncle that the country has that's stolen the brain of a lot of the Republican Party, and I just got to wait for him to fuck off.
We've briefly, but then I have another question.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and answer it as well. So I take him seriously because when he talks, he's usually up the street and around the block from a good point. So like when he talks about something, oftentimes, and he's not making jokes, he's talking about something he actually wants to make changes to. But often he overhypes it, like lock her up. He gets in the office. He says, we're not actually going to pursue our political rival. We're not going to go after Hillary Clinton. It's best to just drop it and move on. The Muslim ban that eventually got changed to a travel ban, which incorporated 7 nations that Obama was also targeting in various ways as well as dangerous nations to take people from. And all of his rhetoric is always up here. And then when he actually implements policy and takes action, it's much more reasonable. I think he's shown time and time again, 50 different instances of him listening to the courts, doing exactly what they say and going about it the right way. I don't think he's given any indication that he's going to break laws in office besides his future campaign promises where we just actually haven't seen his action yet. And even then, that's
Tyler,
kind of...
In all fairness, it appears he's broken laws before he was president, while he was president, and after he was president. So I don't know how you can say I don't see why he would break the law.
With his particular campaign promises, I'm saying specifically, yeah, in terms of his business, he's done.
But I mean, like, once a criminal, like, probably going to be a criminal.
I don't know, man. I used to sell weed when I was younger, and I'm not a criminal now.
Yeah, but we can evaluate like the scale of the crimes in question. But this is the other thing where I just get confused. So, Tyler, do you think Trump is more, less, or as reasonable, to whatever extent that word ever applied to Donald Trump, in 2023 compared to 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019?
I'd say he's more reasonable and actually gotten better at public speaking since then. He's toned down. He hasn't said anything like racist, like what he said about that judge in a few years. He's toned down a lot of his real harsh stuff.
Are you talking about the Hispanic judge saying that he's a Mexican judge or whatever?
And because of his stance on immigration, he couldn't legitimately oversee his trial. Yeah, that was probably the most racist thing he said.
Okay, now, I'm not asking. I'm not. So the racism notwithstanding, I'm just saying, just overall, you think Trump, just overall, racism notwithstanding, is a more reasonable person, more like even-tempered, has better judgment, things like that, now than he was when he was president?
I'm not going to say the bar has moved very much, but yeah, I'd say he's gotten a little bit better. Yeah,
interesting. So I
would disagree with that, actually.
Yeah, I would. I think he has become much more unhinged personally. I don't know what IRI thinks. IRI?
Yeah, he's saying vermin, and he's poisoning our blood comments. I mean, he seems to be getting a little desperate to get people worked up. So it does seem to be getting a little worse.
So while I do disagree with Tyler about that, I think that we should. I think the disagreement is I don't think that he's as unhinged as you guys do. So we have examples of the Supreme Court while Trump was in office, ruling against a policy that Trump was in favor of. So the DACA thing, for example, or the implementation of the census shit. Off the top of my head, I can't remember, where he wanted to have like a citizenship question on the census. They ruled against him. He didn't say, "Hey, ignore the courts, fuck them, do it anyway." He agreed with. He went along with the ruling and tried to find some other way to get this policy passed that would work. Yeah, so I don't think he's gone unhinged enough to shift that behavior from working with the courts and trying to work with the process to just doing it because he's angry.
I got 50 examples like that.
But I guess and again, I'm going to speak for IRI, but to me it's immaterial because my question is not, I think you'd have a point if we were dealing with the same guy, but at least 3 out of 4 of us agree it's not really the same guy. And when he's also saying things that he would do things differently, like he's saying on Truth Social and at rallies, and I would do this different. I wouldn't put so-and-so, this person's a rhino, complete disappointment. The things that were present, both about him and around him in round 1, he says he's going to avoid in round 2. And so it's, again, I'm almost like saying like, okay, Minecraft and Wick. It's like, that's not possible. Nobody's a threat to Wick because that person wasn't a threat to Wick the day before.
Why does this make you smile so much? Why does it make you laugh so much?
I know, you're right. Turn that frown upside. But it's this idea that this person who's threatening to do a bad thing Wednesday, that can't be the case because he didn't do anything bad on Monday. I just don't think in any other situation the arguments that you're presenting hold up to scrutiny.
Oh, absolutely. Like in court. If you go to court, having previous offenses of violent crimes gets you a higher sentence when you get convicted of a violent crime.
You're talking about a legal standard for conviction. I don't think a judge would say to somebody, hey, listen, because we can't prove that this person is a threat and will Minecraft you, you have absolutely no reason to be concerned. No. That's not, you're talking about a legal standard for conviction versus whether or not it is legitimate to believe that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. We're talking about 2 very different standards.
Real quick, I'll let you finish, right? But just to remind everyone, we're in the last quarter of this, and I have one more kind of question that I wanted to bring forth to everyone, and to talk about because it's been brought up a few times. So finish your point, Tyler. Then I want to get.
I just want to 2016 versus. I think we're looking at the 2015-2016 Trump with the I really think if you went back and looked at some of his rhetoric then, you'd see he's definitely toned it down a bit. Do you remember his stance on Afghanistan? He was on the 5 talking to 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙, and he asked, what are you going to do in the Middle East? And he said, we're going to bomb the shit out of them. And he doesn't say things like that now. When he said, talking about Muslims, we're going to ban everybody from one religion from this country until we can figure out what the hell's going on. He doesn't say things like that now. I would say at a lot of levels, Trump has reined in his rhetoric to be, and he's learned lessons. A lot of these things have hurt him. Making jokes about injecting bleach into your system during a COVID
presentation.
Conference. Yeah. It was just completely stupid, and it hurt his poll numbers, and he hasn't done shit like that since. I'd say he's learning from his mistakes on a PR frame a bit.
I agree. He is learning from what he considers to be his mistakes, but I think it also goes in the opposite direction. I don't think that Trump will allow himself to be checked by what he believes deep state rhinos like Mike Pompeo or like Bill Barr and other people. He is going to surround himself with yes men. We have no reason to believe otherwise, especially when he's telling us, I am aware that I did have people who resisted my orders the last time. I'm acknowledging that. Not going to happen in round 2. We have to acknowledge that.
Just real quickly to Dooby's point about he hasn't flouted any court orders or anything. He did say recently that he will be a dictator just on day 1. I understand you guys say he clarified that it's shut the border down and drill baby drill, but that could mean extrajudicial action to shut the border down and to drill baby drill, no?
It's also violated his gag orders and shit like that. Like he flouts the court whenever he feels it's convenient. That's what I'm saying. Like
he's been fined $15,000 by a judge.
I thought his gag order got taken off.
I think actually it was reinstituted and then it was appealed, and I think most of it was upheld. But I'm going just based straight off.
So I'm gonna do two things. I have a question I want to grapple with. I do have 2 super chats I want to read just briefly. I got to make my money, gang. $5 from 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 to say pure speculation, but what percentage of the American voter base do you think would literally drink the Kool-Aid if Trump urged them to? That's a point. 𝕍𝖎 for $5 to Dooby and Tyler. Is it possible that Trump is so jaded from his previous presidency that he will exercise more extreme measures than he had before? And my question to the panel, this has been brought up several times, and I'd like us to discuss it and elaborate it if we can. I'll elaborate on it if we can. The Heritages Foundation's 2025 project. Can we talk about that a little bit? Go ahead if you're familiar, and thank you for the gift subs, average debate enjoyer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'd agree that he might be more extreme, quote unquote, going forward. But I think what that means, what he's indicated that means, is he's going to be less willing to work with the what he considers to be the rhinos in the Republican Party, right? So the handlers in the Republican Party that came in trying to steer him around in his first term. I don't think there's any reason to believe that he would just buck the Supreme Court and say, "Hey, yeah, they ruled against me. Do it anyway." I think if you're talking about that kind of extreme, I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that he's going to do anything like that. I think I think it's kind of fear mongering.
Okay. Does anyone want to talk about the 2025 project? And
Yeah, I
elaborate?
will in just a second. But before I do the Kool-Aid thing, I think of the Republican Party, I don't know what this percentage would be of the American public, but I would say 30%. I think I could see 30% of the Republican Party drinking the Kool-Aid if Trump ordered them to, which is about 29.5% too high.
I don't know if I put a number to it, but he did like discourage people from wearing a mask, and he didn't encourage them to get the vaccine, even though he's like, I don't know. I feel like he almost did condemn some people to death by not being a good leader and example, and like talking about the vaccine he got, wearing a mask more. So
Didn't
if
a guy
that's
actually
Kool-Aid,
bleach
then they
himself?
drank it.
Didn't a guy actually bleach himself or inject him? Didn't, or was it
Well,
it that, or was
well,
it
They
People
think
definitely used alternative medicines
That's
like
what
the
it-
dewormer or
yeah.
whatever it was, and got
Yeah.
poisoned. I think some guy
That's what
died.
it was.
So
the
That's-
guy that died, I think his wife was being investigated for murdering him. He drank fish tank cleaner.
I think they should drop. I think
I
they
don't
should
know
drop
anything
the
about that, but,
investigation. They should drop the investigation because she wasn't a threat to him the day before. So I don't know why we would assume she'd be a threat to him the day after.
I just don't think it's that far fetched to say that Trump has some blood on his hands. I think he also got Ashley Babbitt murdered by his lies, and her, her actions on that day wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for his nonsense.
So actually, I agree with Ira. Right? So I think he does have blood on his hands. Ashley Babbitt's, but God knows how many other people, right? I think his COVID response was fucking terrible. So I agree with you there. But this idea that people would kill themselves for him, that's what drinking the Kool-Aid is, right? They're just going to kill themselves because Trump said so. If I guess I don't know if the 25% thing was like a real number, but
No, I do think it'd probably be about 10%, but no, I don't think it'd be like a full
that's
third of the
still too
Republican
high.
Party.
Obviously any movement's gonna have its crazies, right? Like there's so QAnon weirdos going around, right? I was talking to one yesterday actually on my server, showing me like extremely zoomed in pixelated pictures of Kanye and trying to explain how the pixels were like some secret message. He says, these people are fucking out there. But I think it's a tiny minority of the population, and I think that most of Trump's base just legitimately believes that the election was stolen, so they're so supporting their guy.
Yeah, I'll give them credit. Like, these people are resilient, man. Like they've been told a nightmare scenario: the election's stolen, Biden's corrupt, he's working for China, and they still go about their lives and just keep trucking. So I give them credit.
Yeah,
I think American people are resilient.
Just to be clear, I don't think most people don't mean literally kill themselves when they talk about drinking the Kool-Aid. What they're talking about is simply being kind of mindless automatons and drones and just doing what they're told, right? So whatever Trump says, they'll do. Whatever Trump feeds them, they'll eat. Whatever Trump tells them is the truth, they will believe, right? That's the general meaning.
No, 100%. Like to Kilo's point, there are multiple cult experts. There have been books written on this, like career social psychologists, who say that MAGA is a cult, and it certainly hits like the various criterion for it. But with respect to Project 2025, yeah, that is a source of trouble, because you're talking about whatever intellectual brain power you think.
Can you give us a brief TLDR on what that is?
Yes,
a lot of my audience is asking me. So go ahead.
Project 2025 is the name for the Heritage Foundations, and then that's a right-wing think tank. They're incredibly influential and have been for decades. Their attempt to recruit thousands of people and codify a step-by-step procedure to radically reshape the federal government. And it's not just for Trump. Now, Trump is very closely affiliated with it, but if they actually released a book, it's not in the shadows. They published a book. You can get a physical copy of it or a PDF. It's about 1,000 pages. And it's for the next conservative president, whoever that is. So if Ron DeSantis gets a nomination, be for him too. It's a blueprint to use the power of the executive to expand executive power, erode checks and balances, and to remake the country in a Christian conservative frame. It's incredibly dangerous.
Okay, so a few things. I want to jump in here actually and kind of defend Trump a little bit on the vaccine. Trump himself and also the cult claim. If you look at Trump's base, the MAGA base, and then you look at what Trump's saying on the vaccines, they completely are opposite of each other. The anti-vax movement on the right is completely antithetical to Trump taking credit for the vaccines, trying to get people out there to get them, saying it's one of the biggest things of his administration. And not only that, under oath, Fauci praised the Trump administration for his handling of COVID. And then Biden, when he came in, praised the Trump administration for Operation Warp Speed and getting the vaccine out there. So there's a lot of people that kind of backed up Trump's COVID response, even if I don't think it was that great. I don't think it would have looked that different from Biden's or Hillary Clinton. It was pretty similar status quo government actions taken. So
no, hell no. Wait a minute, no, I'm gonna fight you on that one. Hell no, that's asinine.
Yeah, Trump. I could
wait a
find
minute,
you a year and a half of Trump backing the vaccine while his base is anti-vaccine.
The problem is that the anti-vax skepticism that came from the right is because of the pandemic itself. So the reason that right-wingers and Republicans per capita didn't take the vaccine seriously is because Trump, with respect to the pandemic that the vaccine was supposed to treat, downplayed it consistently, time and time again from the White House, number one. And number two, just an ethos of skepticism. Trump told his base constantly to question everything. And he did it with respect to COVID. And then when the time came to get the jab, the chickens came home to roost. And you can see it now because Trump doesn't talk about the vaccine now. The one and only time he got booed at a rally, he basically cut that shit out and deleted it. He doesn't talk about his vaccination accomplishments. And then with respect to how the two administrations would compare, here's the problem. Biden would not have undercut, nor would any other Democrat, and I suspect most Republicans would not have undercut Fauci and chief medical advisors at the time, their best practices. Most people operate under the heuristic, defer to experts. If your doctor says this, you better have a goddamn good reason to contradict them. Otherwise, shut up and do what your doctor tells you. That's how the vast majority of people operate. That's what would have happened if a Democrat or a sane Republican had been in the White House. Dr. Fauci, Deborah Birx, all these others, they say social distance. Hey, guys, for the sake of the country, we're dealing with a crisis. Let's make it a challenge. Let's get this thing under control. Let's outperform every other economy in every other country on earth. Let's do this. Let's get this right. Let's save lives and get it under control. He would have rallied Republican governors and senators and Congress people to take it seriously. That's not what Trump did. So I reject wholeheartedly the idea that Biden or a Democrat would have done the same damn thing.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to accuse you of a metric shift or a goalpost shift here, because what we were talking about is 30% of the Republican Party drinking the Kool-Aid and believing exactly what Trump tells them. Then I bring up two and a half years of Trump saying one thing about the vaccine and his base thinking something completely different. And it's, he alluded to skepticism and they came to conclusions on their own. And they ignored Trump.
That wasn't a goalpost shift. What I'm saying is so number one, Trump wasn't nearly as consistent on COVID or the vaccine as you suggest he was. He downplayed the pandemic from the beginning. So then if I spend 2.5 years telling you, Tyler, and I'm your cult leader, and I say, listen, this thing, don't take it seriously. It's not a big deal. It's fine. It'll go away. Don't worry about it. Yeah, the masks, whatever. And then the time comes for you to get vaccinated for it. And then I occasionally switch it up and say, actually, you should get the jab. After 2.5 years, you might be thinking, no, I'm not going to get the jab. You said it's not a big deal. Who gives a shit? I'm saying that the ethos of skepticism about the pandemic and just in general that he helped cultivate in the Republican Party helps explain why the rates of vaccination differ between the two parties.
I would argue the opposite, though, because if you look at the first person to mention COVID in politics for the most part on the big bully pulpit stage that the president has, at least, and these higher up politicians, was Trump during his 2020 State of the Union speech. And I remember several months after that, Nancy Pelosi saying, go to Chinatown, don't ignore Trump's xenophobic calls and things like that. There was a long time there where the Democratic Party was saying these things. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden both made statements that could qualify as vaccine skepticism. They said they wouldn't trust Trump on the vaccine or trust Trump's vaccine in particular and things like that. So that switched as soon as the offices switched. And again,
no, it did not switch. It did not switch as soon as the office switched. Biden said one thing once, which is that he wouldn't trust Trump. He trusts the scientists. So as long as the scientists say it's fine, that he'd get the jab. And Kamala Harris said effectively the same thing. That was not a campaign or like a repetitive message from the Biden campaign at the time. But I'll take your point on the State of the Union because I'll have to go back and double check that. But Trump was inconsistent with respect to his COVID management. And I'll also point out that Deborah Birx, who was a Trump-appointed medical advisor, he was the one that Trump looked to when he was like, so can we like bleach? I think there's something going on with bleach. She was the one like, shut the fuck up. She publicly testified before Congress and said everything, in her opinion, after the first 100,000 deaths could have been prevented if the pandemic had been taken more seriously by the administration. So I think
that's unfair because Tyler's right. So initially, if I remember correctly, so I'd agree with you that the initial response was garbage, right? That Trump should have acted way more quickly. But I remember, and I'm sure you guys remember, that when he did start taking action, when he did start cutting travel to China and encouraging people to stop going to China, stop going to Chinatown, quote unquote, he was called a racist. He was called xenophobic. He was Nancy Pelosi in the Democrat Party said that you should go to China, actually, that it's totally safe to go to Chinatown, right? And to be around people who've recently visited China, and suggesting other sides is racism. And if I remember correctly, it was more than one statement by Joe Biden. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember one being that he didn't believe that they would go through all the tests that it needed to verify that it's safe, and that he would think that another time he said this, it's like he would think it might be a fake vaccine or it might not work, might not be real.
I need to see the quotes on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
I can again off the top of my head, I could be totally wrong, but this is what I remember.
Okay.
But again, I think that there's plenty of skepticism from the Democrat Party, from Democrat officials, that were just as bad or even worse than what Trump did early on.
Why were people vaccinated at different rates, Dooby?
I think there's a lot there. I think that it's true that there's like a vaccine skepticism that exists within the right wing of the party. And
I thought vaccine well, wait a minute.
That predates Trump.
Here's where I'm confused because I have the exact opposite. I thought vaccine skepticism was like fucking Jenny McCarthy and Hollywood lefties until COVID, and then it reversed course, and then Republicans took vaccine skepticism, which was confined to Hollywood, and then they fucking ran with it. They mass produced it on a scale of tens of millions. So I don't recall that ethos of vaccine skepticism from Republicans. I don't remember.
No, hold on. So
I think this is largely we're on a rabbit hole a little bit. With
sorry, Project 2025.
I understand. Well, it's okay because we're kind of running out of time here.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give each of you a chance to. Well, I'll just say this, gang. It has been an interesting discussion. There's a lot to dig into. We can't possibly cover all the topics that we needed to in this night alone. As the election starts coming up more and more, we're going to have more and more political style debates like this. So if you like this content, if you love this content, you hit that like button, you hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube. If you're on Twitch or if you're on Kick, hit that follow button. Throw me some super chats like Lex Friedman does. Throw me some bits. Throw me some subs like avgdebate Joy Tyler did, right? All great things. But I want to give each of these people a chance to shout themselves out and give closing thoughts and closing statements. And we'll start in the reverse order we started. We'll start with Dooby, and then we'll end with 𝕖𝖎. So, Dooby, go ahead. Tell us where we can find you, and why is Trump a threat or not a threat to democracy? Go ahead.
I think you need to articulate the threat. I don't think that's been done in this conversation. I can agree that there might be like whispers of a threat, but I think that if you look at his actions, look at what he's actually proposing, I just don't think it's real. I think that there's a lot of narrative building and mythos building around Trump on both sides, and I think it's really unhealthy. I'm Dooby. I help run the politics server on Discord, the best and biggest politics server on the Discord platform. We have, I think, 85,000 users right now. Somewhere around there. We have hundreds of people active in the voice channels all day, lots of activity in the text channels. So if you ever wanted to like yell at somebody for disagreeing with you, you can find lots of people to disagree with there. We're a very politically diverse community. And we do AMAs with lots of cool people. I think IRI has been on there, I think once or twice. Josiah, I'd love to have you on, because you're a very intelligent guy, a very intelligent representative of your side of the aisle. And I'm always looking for people I'm always looking for new perspectives to expose the user base to. And this can be anybody from the reasonable deal like Josiah to somebody like Nick Fuentes, or I think last year we had Roger Stone, right? So the fucking awful person. So my interest there is just to expose people to ideas, different perspectives that can be challenged and kind of sorted through. That's I think the link is discord.gg/politics, and yeah, you'll find me there most of the time.
Well, thanks for coming today and taking time out of your busy schedule wrangling political discorders. I really appreciate you. Next up, IRI. Go ahead.
All right. Well, this was a fun debate. I appreciate everyone keeping it cool and expressing themselves. Thank you, Wick, for hosting this. I do think Trump is a threat to our democracy. Just looking at his actions in 2020, and I think the American people will hear the case as it unfolds. We've gotten a preview of that from Jack Smith and Fani Willis in Georgia, but these cases will unfold, and people will hear the whole story. But committing fraud, trying to influence public officials to do things against their will, and this is just it undermines our democracy. But also some of the points you guys brought up, him talking about fake news and undermining public trust in our news organizations and public institutions. I mean, I think this all contributes to just hurting our democracy. I think our democracy is strong and it survives any of this. I don't think Trump has a real chance of winning in 2024. I know people freak out when I say that, but I'm looking at 5% GDP, inflation at 3%, unemployment at 3.7%, staying under 4% for a lengthy period of time. All signs point to things continuing down this road. So a year of Bidenomics, plus Trump being convicted and probably on house arrest, I just think it's going to be a disaster for the GOP across the board. And even just the redrawing of maps in New York is going to net us probably 4 to 6 seats. And the Supreme Court has given us a seat or two down in Alabama and South Carolina. So we got the House. We just got to hold on to the Senate. But in any case, I think it's a bloodbath coming for the GOP. So as much fun it is to talk about, is Trump a threat? I don't think he's ever going to get anywhere near that White House again to even give it a shot.
Well, from your
and I go by I'm really important. Sorry, Wick. I go by I'm really important, all one word, on Twitch, YouTube, and Kick as well. Thank you, Wick.
No, thank you. I really appreciate you coming through. From your lips to God's ears. We'll see if that comes true. Tyler, go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to do my introduction in reverse order. Everybody, it's the holiday season. Open your hearts and your wallets and your checkbooks and praise this man, Wick. Give this guy some money. He deserves it. I think I did a pretty solid job. I didn't get all my points in, but I did a pretty solid job at pointing out we've seen Trump run up against legal barriers 50 plus times. We know how he's going to act. We've seen people take his words and make him appear to be this demon that he's really not. He seems like just kind of a liberal conservative that has a bit of an ego problem and a big mouth. I don't think he's a threat. I don't think anyone really is. That being said, dooby, thank you for stepping in at the last minute to be my partner. Very much appreciate you. Josiah, your charm and charisma is something that I envy. You're so good at it. And I'm really important. Very nice to meet you. Hopefully, your political analysis, especially just in your conclusion there, that's something I could sit down and talk about for hours. I think that once Trump starts to get in the eye of the public, we're going to see a lot of his poll numbers, which are looking very good right now, start dropping. He's up right now in 7 battleground states, and aggregate on RCP sees him about 2.4 points ahead of Biden nationally. I think we're going to see that plummet once he's in the spotlight a bit. But yeah, and Biden's having a great 2023 so far. If we see these economic trends continue, I could see that whole economy argument going out the window for the Republicans. So yeah, it's looking better for Democrats as time goes on than you say, but I think it's going to be a fun one to watch.
Okay. Well, thanks for being here, Tyler. Really appreciate you. And yeah, thanks for coming through. We'll see what happens. Last but certainly not least, the man with the plan, who's blowing up right now. Okay, Josiah, what you got for us?
Yeah. So, listen, I appreciate the invitation, Wick. This is a lot of fun. I love talking politics. I don't have the time much to do debates anymore, but it is fun because I'm passionate about this stuff. I know you all care about it too, so it's good. Tyler, it's always good to spar with you. Dooby, we've never met, but I think you have like a great ASMR voice, just FYI. So I don't know if you like record. Yeah. And IRI, baby, it's always good talking to you, especially because he is the ultimate optimist. Like I hear him and I get inspired because I'm a pessimist and a cynic, and the glass is always half empty. That's just who I am, and it's in my political analysis too. So it's good. So as far as Trump is Trump a threat? Sure. I think that if you look to his past actions and rhetoric, particularly at the end of his administration, fake electors, trying to put pressure on various officials, including Mike Pence, trying to stay in power, doing everything possible to stay in power, I think that's a problem. The peaceful transfer of power and leaving power, that Cincinnatus principle, that's inherent to our democracy. That's what George Washington embodied when he turned down power twice. And it's an ethic that, well, I guess FDR kind of broke with it for a while, but that's basically been a policy of heads of state, and Trump does not embody it at all. As far as his aspirations, he's talked about pursuing the media, members of the media critics, because he doesn't like what they say. He says they're corrupt, but he can't point to a crime. He's clearly not interested in availing himself of legal recourses. He wants to staff his administration with loyalists. He wants to avoid the Bill Barrs and the Jeff Sessions and the Mike Pences that were there before. He's called for the suspension of the Constitution. He talks about deploying the Insurrection Act, which, by the way, is not really justiciable. It's a lot of deference. Like, you ask legal scholars, they'll say the Insurrection Act was built for George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, people that they could trust not to abuse it. It would be in the hands of Trump. The president is the most powerful person on earth. And the idea that because Trump didn't breach the guardrails before, he won't do it again, that logic doesn't follow. Again, I use the metaphor of somebody on a highway. If they crash into guardrails, we don't pull the car out, toss them the keys to a truck and say, try again. We say, get the fuck away while we reinforce the guardrails. It's the same thing here. Our institutions are built on good faith. They are not divinely crafted or magically enforced. Good faith actors have to enforce them. And even our founding fathers predicted and believed that the system they created was subject to abuse. They didn't say, tyranny's not possible, dictatorship's not possible in the United States. So anyone, and I do mean this with love, be it Tyler, Dooby, or anyone watching, if you think it's not possible here in the United States, you're an idiot. If all you think is that Trump is not capable of doing it, that's something we can talk about. But if you just genuinely believe can't happen here, you're out of your goddamn mind. And the last thing I'll say is even people who worked for Trump closely, people who know him better infinitely than the rest of us do, they say he's a threat to democracy. So all these things in aggregate, Trump is clearly a threat to democracy. Vote blue in November 2024. Thank you.
Okay. Check him out at Pondering Politics on YouTube. He's a great guy. I don't know if he has any other socials, but give him a subscribe.
Just my OF. You recognize these feet anywhere.
I'll DM you later. But for now, gang, it's been fun. We're gonna read out. We're gonna, IRI, you're still streaming after this, right?
I am. Yep.
Yep. We're gonna continue the Politicus Maximus stuff. We're gonna send you his way. So make sure you let him know it is a hate raid. And we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Later, dudes.
See ya.
Bye.
Wickles, stay around for a minute. I want to pick your brain about something.
Take her easy. Thanks, guys.
See ya, Tyler. Have a good one, buddy.
Okay, give us a second. We're still not read it out. It takes a minute.
I have to tell you my deep, dark secrets, though.